This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
So let's talk about that. Supposedly, there's supposed to be this big split between the Roadie and Jarrett here in the middle of the ring, but that doesn't happen, and instead we're treated to a celebration with Shawn Michaels in the dressing room, and there's no split here. And Doc Hendricks is trying to babble on here about them splitting up. Here's what the Observer would say, and this is a week later. The biggest storyline revolving around the WWF In Your House 2 show was just minutes after being involved in the two best matches on the show. Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie quit the promotion. Details as to why are sketchy as press time, although it is known they were unhappy about the angle, which had been a major source of discussion over the past few weeks. Originally, during the In Your House pay-per-view show, when Jarrett was lip-syncing a concert of the song, there was to be a screw-up, revealing Roadie as the singer, and between that and the screw-up in the IC title match, it would start the feud with them meeting at SummerSlam. There was a lot of talk, largely based on how well the video was received, that doing a turn this early was premature. As it was, they did the turn, or at least were booked to do it later in the show, when Jarrett lost the IC title to Shawn Michaels. Jarrett and Roadie were supposed to do a breakup after the match, but didn't do it. Instead, they went backstage and had Doc Hendricks, in his lone appearance, talk about the breakup happening backstage and a fight without it actually taking place. Jarrett and Roadie simply walked out of the building that night in the middle of the show. There are plenty of rumors as to why the two men would leave together, since Jarrett, mainly from the video, was actually starting to show some charisma after a lengthy mega push that had for the most part been unsuccessful. There were also rumors that Jarrett's father, Jerry, who was working as a consultant to WCW, that somehow there's a connection there, and WCW is said to be interested in Jarrett, but there is no small matter of Jarrett's WWF contract to overcome. Roadie, who was being given his first career break after being a jobber with WCW and Smoky Mountain as Brian Armstrong, for the looks of things, seems to just be walking away just as his career was getting ready to take off. At the live show on 7/24 in Louisville, they didn't give a strong impression that both were gone, but Vince McMahon did give away that Jarrett was lip-syncing the previous night and left the impression that Roadie was singing, and said that Jarrett would never sing on a WWF show. So this feels very un-Vince McMahon-like for him not to have control, and this is one of the reasons I was most excited to talk about this, because this is the first time that Jarrett has had a big angle like this and a big featured spot, certainly the first time for Roadie, and they just walk out, which is pretty uncommon in the World Wrestling Federation. What happened? What did you hear happened? How was it resolved?
Well, it never was resolved. It was unprofessional. As I said, Jeff had called Pat and I earlier on the week and had cold feet, didn't want to do it, and called Vince, but agreed to do it and said that he was on board and that they were going to do the finish as we had laid out and go forward with the program. It never indicated anything else to anybody else. To my knowledge, Shawn Michaels didn't know they were leaving afterwards. Shawn was already gone, so he wasn't a part of it anyway. When Jeff came back, I was running gorilla position, and I said, "What the fuck?" And he just kept walking. He and Roadie just kept walking right by me. I'm stuck at gorilla position. I can't get up and go talk to anybody. I can't go anywhere. And during the next match on the card, my brother Tom came over to me and said, "They're gone." I said, "Who?" And he said, "Jeff and Brian just left. They took their bags. They came back. They took their bags and walked out and said goodbye and said, they're out. They quit. They're gone." So that was all I knew at that point. So later on that night, we were driving to the next town. I don't even remember what the hell the next town was, but we were passed on the road, and then the car slowed down and started flashing his lights at us, and it was Jerry Lawler, who had been on the phone with Jerry Jarrett.
It's important to remember, this is not in a time when somebody could just text somebody.
Yeah, no, texting was
not a thing.
A thing on a piece of paper. So we pulled over, and Lawler told us that Road Dogg and Jeff were having drinks at Jerry Jarrett's hot tub. That was the exact quote. they're over there drinking wine in Jerry Jarrett's hot tub right now, and that Jerry says he's got them secure in WCW, and that's where they're both going, and they're done. And that was all we knew. Jeff wasn't answering his phone. Jerry Jarrett wasn't answering his phone. And we just said, okay, move on.
How does Vince react to that news?
Vince was pissed. Vince was pissed because we had invested a lot of money in that angle. We invested a lot of money in that song and in that video and building up to tell that story. And we were really hoping to capitalize on Road Dogg's singing talents beyond that. So that was going to be a major program for us moving forward. But it's now gone. So you just say, you know what? Fuck it. Next.
What was Jeff's contract situation like that, to the best of your knowledge?
I know he still had some time left on it. I don't really remember how much time he had left on it, but they were both still under contract. But God, you hold my feet to the fire. I don't have any clue how long he had left.
So that goes down in July of 95, and he doesn't actually pop up in WCW. Instead, he winds up just working with the USWA and coming off the road. I feel like we should mention here that Jerry Jarrett did an interview with the Pro Wrestling Torch around this time, and he's explaining that Jeff believed his character was being burned out too quickly. He thought they were advancing the storyline on the split too soon. And so according to Jerry at the time, Jeff had been expressing interest to him about joining Jerry in non-wrestling related family business. Quote, Jeff was unhappy with the direction of his character in the WWF. His departure was an accumulation of many things. He didn't feel like his character was being utilized where he would have longevity. Then compounded with the burn factor, there are now 24 pay-per-views between WWF and WCW. Your candle starts burning the second you're exposed in either of the two national companies. Everybody has a certain shelf life. He is out of the wrestling business as far as I'm concerned, and I'm delighted. I hope he sits out a year. With 24 pay-per-views a year, where are these promotions going to hatch wrestlers to fill the cards? This is not a power play. Jeff had talked to Vince about his dissatisfaction with the character and pushed for the last 6 months. Now Vince is telling people he didn't know Jeff was upset. As someone who sat in the promoter's chair, I would tell you, you know what to do when the office wants you to do it, or get out of the kitchen. Jeff expressed his views, didn't get a response, and then walked. Did you or anyone in the office pass around this issue of the Observer, or the Torch rather? Does anybody have anything to say about Jerry Jarrett taking the stance after not too long prior to this being in the good graces with the company?
Well, Jerry had been away from the company for a while at this point, and there was very little stock taken in Jerry Jarrett, what he had to say while he was with the company. So even less stock was taken in any of his comments that he would have to say after this point.
Eventually, Dave would write that as the week went on, Jarrett and WWF officials were at least still talking and trying to patch things up. And he believed that for most, it would be an unforgivable sin just to walk out in the middle of a show, but that some folks within Titan apparently thought enough of Jarrett and the fact that he had been pretty much a model employee up to that point that they needed to try to work things out. Do you remember that being the case, that you guys were still actively trying to put things together at that point?
Yes, we were. We wanted to save it. We had a lot invested in it, and we really wanted to save it. Vince was pissed. From my vantage point, I was done. He walked. We had talked about it. We addressed all of his concerns, and I was ready to move on to the next thing. You can't allow yourself to get bogged down and let one guy just bring everything to a halt. So from our vantage point, and I say our vantage point, from my vantage point and Pat's vantage point at the time, was move on. Vince wanted to save it. And creatively, I wanted to save it. Business-wise, I was fuck it next.
Let me ask you this. There's rumor and innuendo out there that Jeff's stance at the time, and maybe some of this is from his dad getting in his ear, or his dad being a consultant for WCW and him thinking he could just make a power play. But supposedly he was upset that he was dropping the Intercontinental title and being exposed as a fraud as a singer, both in his hometown and all on the same night. He felt like that was just too much in his hometown on the same night, that would be difficult for him to overcome. Could you see that? Or do you think that that's just unfair?
I think that is paranoia, and I think that Jeff Jarrett, the promoter and owner and creative person that he is now, would share my point of view, that was the best thing for his career to do at that time, and that it would only help his career doing all of those things, losing the championship, being exposed. His world is crumbling down around him as a heel. And not only to do it, you do it in your hometown. And again, it was the birthplace of country music. You know, it was the home of country music in Nashville, Tennessee. What about Jeff Jarrett's hometown? Let's humiliate him in his hometown. No, it was in Nashville, where country music is synonymous with the name of Nashville. To be exposed that, hey, it's not him, it's this other guy. And then for the heel, the revenge that he's going to extract on the guy that he brought in, his viewpoint, a heel viewpoint, brought into the business, brought along for this ride. I thought it was a great story, and I believe that Jeff saw it completely wrong in that way, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about the video, because one of the reasons you guys were trying to make this work is you guys had spent a boatload of money on the video, and allegedly we're going to try to sell this song in a big way. Do you remember that being the case, that you guys had plans to try to, sell the song beyond just throwing it on that CD?
Oh my God, absolutely. Not only that, we had planned on doing an album with Brian James.
If you had to ballpark, how much money do you think you guys as a company had invested at the time in the Jeff Jarrett video?
God, I have no idea, but it was a ton of actual hard dollars in the video and the production, the recording, and not only that, all the time that we spent investing in it on television. And those are real dollars, and that's real money that you just can't get back.
200 grand?
Millions if you look at the amount of time that you invest in television time over that whole period. So it was a lot because it was a big story, and it was something that we invested a lot of time in.
It's kind of tough to sell it if neither the singer or Milli Vanilli are there, right? I mean,
yeah.
If neither guy's there, it's hard to sell it.
Yeah, you got nothing.
But you never had a conversation. Who was keeping the lines of communication open with Jeff during this time?
J.J. Dillon and Vince were. Mainly J.J. J.J. had a relationship with Jerry Jarrett.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com. All right, time out. Now this is what I'm looking forward to talking to. You and the Road Dogg walk out on Vince McMahon. And I think the big idea was we're going to jump to WCW, but not so fast, my friend. You wind up having to sit out your contract, and I think your dad even did a torch talk back in the day, and there was a lot of discussion in the business, the inner workings, if you will, about his perceived influence on your career at the time. Looking back, and I know we're going to do a whole episode on this one day, if you had this to do over again, would you change anything?
I mean, look, at my age now and my life experiences and me just understanding the fundamental pillar of any relationship is open communication and often communication. That's where it broke down, completely broke down. I really think if I would have voiced my opinion at least loud enough, that me and Vince have talked about this since then, but if I would have voiced it loud enough, and I'm not saying screaming or nothing, but just maybe, hey, I'm and look, this whole situation, and there's look, the Brian walking out and WCW wasn't on the radar. You can think what you want. It wasn't. It was a creative differences. And I really thought there was and I want you to answer. I'm going to flip it and I'll do this often. I believe, and this is what's sort of wacky. Me and Brian got together, and again, this is a whole podcast. Me and Brian got together. He was in Lowell, Mass. He sang in front of Vince and Bruce and others. They got him a job. They put him with me. Me and Brian were on camera as Double J and the Roadie less than 6 months.
Right.
And to this day, I still believe it. Now, Vince is the boss, and he had the right to split us up and shoot the angle. I felt there was so much more gas left in the tank to do another song, to do a concert. I just didn't think we were ready to be split up. And I voiced it multiple times, but not loud enough. And certainly I don't think they thought that I was going to say, I'm not up for this. I'm going to lose the title to Shawn, and I did. And my track record sort of speaks for itself when it's time to do the honors. But I'm not doing the angle afterwards. And it literally was that. And Brian will tell you to this day, Brian, you make the decision that you want to do. I'm leaving, but you don't have to. You've got, and he, there's a whole, I'll leave a little bit of a cliffhanger here. There's a couple other reasons that he left as well, but it was a creative difference that I didn't talk through, and I'll put that on me more than I put it on Vince, because I didn't over communicate with him. But mine was, it had zero to do with WCW. It had zero to do with my father. It had everything to do that from a creative perspective. I thought there was no rhyme or reason. The song had just really started going, and I'm Nashville, so I'm biased, but I mean, I think the song, quote unquote, had been out 6 weeks. That's right. Nothing. It's 6-8 weeks. It's nothing. And coming off of, Royal Rumble won the IC title at Mania. Everybody thought Scott Razor Ramon was winning it back. Everybody. And then, we kicked off the first ever In Your House. And then, we were just getting going. So there you have it. Go ahead.
I'm excited for us to talk about it, but I really do. I mean, and I don't know. It's fun to go back and sort of rebook all this. And I know we're going to do a lot of that on My World with Jeff Jarrett, which starts Tuesday, May 4th. But in regards to this in particular, I'm just fascinated by Vince's insistence to break you guys up, and how that almost feels like a WWE thing. I mean, here recently fans were upset about the Hurt Business, and a few years ago, the Shield, but this is another example of it. And there'll be a lot of other examples that we can break down on My World. But at least for now, let's jump back into Something to Wrestle from 2017, all about Jeff Jarrett. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.